Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Altispeed Technologies, the Ask Noah show starts right now. This is the show where we came to do all the things on Linux they said couldn't be done and take your questions on how to do the same. The phone lines are open this hour. To be a part of the program, it is a free call, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624, or send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. My name is Noah Chalaya. I am your host. Delighted to be here with you as another episode of the Ask Noah show kicks off this hour. Joining me, my co-host, Mr. Steve Ovens. Welcome in, sir.
Good evening, Noah. I've got my parents down visiting from Canada, and
Fun.
it got me thinking about what do we do when we're away from our stuff, away from our home, kind of out of our elements. As I watch my parents just interact differently. My dad comes down, he's got a laptop, and he's got his tablet, and he's got a phone. And
So you're playing tech support this weekend.
right? He just brings all of the things down, and then, and he's always welcome to do this, but he just makes himself at home. I hear him like banging around on my printer trying to get it to work and stuff like that. And so it got me thinking about what do we do when we are away from home, especially for people that want to access stuff at their house, even when they're not away.
Ooh, I like that. And interestingly enough, we have a feedback asking exactly that. We'll get to that in just a moment. 775 or 1-855-450-NOAH, 855-450-6624. You're on Ask Noah. Good evening.
Hey, Noah, how are you?
I'm doing excellent. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. Hey, I've called in a few times. I really didn't have a question. I honestly was looking over something this weekend, and I know I've heard you talk about like secure phones and Android, the Graphene OS, that kind of thing.
Yes,
I just happened to see over the weekend. Have you ever heard of a Nitro phone?
I have.
Have you had any experience with it at all, or have you heard anyone? Because I had looked at that, and I had kind of been wondering just what your thoughts were. I mean, is it actually worth? Is it worth getting that over just a flashed phone, or what?
That's a great question. So the Nitro Phone 4 is actually put out by NitroKey, the same people that make the open source version of the YubiKey. The thing to know about the Nitro Phone 4, really, it's just a Pixel 8. It's a Pixel 8 with Graphene OS flashed onto it. So if you're just interested in the most secure mobile operating system or most secure mobile phone that you can get, there's no harm in purchasing a Pixel 8 and flashing it with Graphene OS. Indeed, you're going to wind up with the same end product. What the Nitro Phone 4 is most appropriate is when you have a person that they don't maybe know how to flash an operating system on a phone, or they don't know about Asno, and so they can't just call up and say, hey, how would I do this? This gives you the ability to send your sister or your mother or your cousin or your friend or your brother or whatever a link where they can go add a €1,119 phone to the cart and check out, and what arrives at their doorstep is a Pixel 8 automatically flashed with Graphene OS. So they get the experience, but it's a white glove service. You don't have to do anything. If you go purchase the phone yourself, you'll have to flash it on there. It's not hard to do. In fact, I would argue it's the easiest mobile operating system to flash ever, because this is no word of a lie. You visit a website and click next a bunch of times, and as long as your phone is connected and as long as the bootloader is able to be unlocked, one of those times that you click next, it will unlock the bootloader, flash the operating system, relock the bootloader, restart the phone. It's a slick process.
Okay, cool. No, I've actually been wanting to go and look at something that's a little bit more hardened down. There's just too many things anymore that I see that just it makes you nervous. So, like I say, I saw this, but I also saw the price tag, and I was like, man. But that helps.
Yeah,
Being able to go and just say, all right.
I did not spend my money on a Nitro phone. I bought a Pixel 6. I bought an older Pixel, and I flashed it with Graphene OS. And I'm just about ready to replace my work phone, and I will also buy a Pixel, if not a 6, a 7, and I will probably flash it myself with Graphene OS. It is so easy to do. It is so straightforward that if you've installed it, it is easier than installing an operating system on a computer, or just about.
Well, cool. I appreciate it. I'll tell you, I appreciate your comments on that and on YubiKey as well. Like when I go and I look at things, I was having to look at a security key recently, and I didn't know I didn't know anything about them. And I can remember you saying something about the YubiKey, and that at least got me pointed in the right direction. So I appreciate everything that you guys are doing. You're doing the Lord's work.
You bet. I appreciate you calling in tonight. I appreciate your call and your questions. You can call me back if you have any other questions. All right, let's jump into email. Our first email comes in tonight from Craig. Craig writes in and says, "Hello, guys. I appreciate the past advice regarding access to the home network regarding Tailscale. If I can't load any software or configure Tailscale, for example, a work computer, are there any web browsers or web browser-only options that you could suggest? Not able to add any extensions. I haven't tried Apache Guacamole yet. Thanks for the valuable information that you provide, Craig." So before we answer Craig's question, Steve, I'm going to choose my words carefully here. Do you see any problems with approaching this particular technical problem? Think liability.
So when I was reading this over and giving this some thought, it occurs to me that the root of the question, aside from the technical answers of how do I access something remotely, is I'm on a device that is locked down, that I don't have the ability to potentially access anything outside by the choice of the person who gives me the laptop, whether it's work or whatever. And so when I was considering this, I was thinking there is always a technical solution for this, but it's something that you do this knowing that if you're doing it, say, on a work computer, you need to know that you could get retroactively punished for this. So you go and do a thing, and maybe they turn a blind eye to it because it almost certainly is going to violate your company policy if it is a work computer. And then the management changes. I've seen this happen at all kinds of places that I work. They turn a blind eye to it, or you have like a handshake kind of agreement with somebody, and that somebody leaves, and the next person comes in and says, "You've been breaking this rule for the last 2 years. That's not acceptable." And so, give that some thought before you proceed.
So just playing devil's advocate for a moment. So I work at this place, and the policy is you can't install anything, you can't modify the system, you can't whatever. Can I log into Facebook? Yeah, you can. It's a website. You can visit a website. Okay. Could I visit my home wiki? Is it a website? Yes. As I said, you can visit websites. That's fine. Just do it on your lunch break. That kind of thing. So if I'm smart enough to expose my remote connection to my home computer via a website, maybe the flip side of that is, well, to the victor go the spoils. If I'm a smart enough nerd to make it work inside of your policy, I didn't install anything. I didn't configure anything. I just went to a website. It's just the website that I go to just, I don't know, lets me RDP into other computers or some such thing.
Yep, and that could be fine, right? That is part of the process, is you have to be comfortable with that, because there's the spirit of the law and then there's the letter of the law. And maybe your company is a letter of the law place, and maybe they'll look at that and say, that's part of the reason, like, we don't want exfiltration of data or whatever, which is usually why they don't allow those kind of outside connections.
So with that disclaimer in mind, you keep that all at the forefront of your mind before you implementing this. But yes, if you're really restricted that much to where even browser extensions are limited, Apache Guacamole is a great way to go. So it's a clientless remote desktop gateway. And what's nice about it is it supports protocols like VNC, RDP, and SSH. Why that's beneficial? Because you could, obviously if you get it running on every machine, you could do that. You could expose every machine to a unique web interface and have them, and you go to this machine, it goes there, you go over here, it goes to that machine, that sort of thing. But the other thing a person could do is set up one central point where you go in, and then from there, you're establishing VNC, RDP connections, or SSH to other machines. Now, you should know by doing that, you're remoting into a remote, right? And so the experience is going to be less than if you were just remoting in directly. Steve, you have some security concerns about doing this at all. If it were your computer, you probably wouldn't set it up this way.
Yeah, primarily because guacamole has to be somehow exposed to the outside world in this scenario, because we're talking about a device that we can't install anything, which means that you can't hide the guacamole web login from something else, right? If you could lock it behind your local LAN and the VPN or some other thing, we're talking a completely different ballgame. But in this case, we're specifically trying to work around either network or device limitations that mean we only basically have access to a web browser. So you'd be exposing guacamole directly to the internet and then trusting in that security, because at some point, once you are on and you've hooked up the guacamole services in your network, it basically lists out the different computers that you can connect to from your guacamole server, and you just kind of click away. And so script kiddies are absolutely going to bang against this. And if it was me, I don't know that I would be comfortable in my own skin being able to say for sure that nobody's going to breach the guacamole server.
So keep all of that in mind. If all of that sounds good to you, another thing that you could consider doing, set guacamole up on like a dedicated DPS and then move the data that you need to access remotely there. Maybe that's not possible in your situation, but what it would allow you to do is create a system whereas if your guac box, that's what I'm going to call it, a guac box, gets popped, then it's just the guacamole box that's compromised, and it's not everything in your home network. But man, what a mess to clean up. If somebody were to get inside of a machine that were sitting on your home network, then you'd have to wonder what else did they get into, and you'd want to go back and clean all that up. So have all of that in mind. But if you hit a point where you're like, yeah, this just doesn't work, that's an option. I will tell you something else. Now, if Steve thought that there was potentially a liability aspect of connecting over a web browser to guacamole, he's going to have an aneurysm when I say this next part. But there have been times where you can take a Linux distro and you can plug like a SanDisk, those little 128 gig flash drives. You can plug those in and you can install the distro right to that device. And so from then on, you boot off of that flash drive, instead of being a quote unquote live distro, no, it's an installed distro. Maybe even it has encryption, all the rest of it, but it follows you from computer to computer. And the only real downside I've ever had in doing that is sometimes the network interfaces get real jacked up. And so especially if you're bouncing from one machine to another and they're all the same model, you get like WLAN 0, WLAN 1, WLAN 2, WLAN 3, 4, and it keeps duplicating them around, which that can be kind of obnoxious. But if you can look past that, you have a little portable Linux distro that comes with you everywhere, and then the hardware just becomes the conduit to get to your thing. And then, of course, once you get inside of your distro, you can have WireGuard, you can have Tailscale, you can have OpenVPN, you can have a whole bunch of stuff all set up.
As long as you have the ability to change the boot order.
That's true. But in the vast majority of machines, I mean, I shouldn't say vast majority of machines, vast majority of organizations, that typically won't lock that down. It'll typically, if you hit F12 or F11, you can, most of the time anyway, get to a boot menu. But and if they don't, that would be prima facie evidence for somebody doesn't want you doing that and has thought through it. And even if they didn't lock it down, there's probably a good chance that that's going to set off some alarm bells if anybody were to walk by your desk and see it. So have all of that in mind. And then in the end, we trust you to do what you think is right. Our second email comes in from Charlie. Charlie writes in and says, "Good day, everyone. Thanks to Noah and Steve for covering the XKeyPass XC Debian situation. I run my Linux system similar to Noah. Using Duvan, I run the system with the core OS programs that are built into the repo system. Then I supplement my other programs as app image. But using app image system, I'm in charge of how frequent and when I update a program, not the Linux team, not the project team, not the creator itself, Charlie." So Steve, this is an interesting take. We've talked a lot about the advantages to the user to have, we've talked a lot about the advantages to the developer for having access to being able to push updates and being able to have control over their projects. We haven't really talked about the user's ability to update, or in this case, not to update.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting perspective. I particularly enjoyed this perspective when I read through this, because I thought of a couple of a couple of things that I pin so that the version doesn't change. For example, OpenVPN, I pin at a specific version number because of compatibility issues by rolling over to the next major version of the various places for which I have to connect for work. And that has caused some grief, for example. So another good one is we've had some problems with Lutris, which is a game manager on Linux, from time to time when it updates and some of the other games don't work properly. So I could absolutely see this being the case of like, this works, I'm just going to continuously launch this thing until it literally no longer works anymore, and I don't want it to change. I can absolutely see that being valuable.
Now, as a developer, if I want control over my project so that my users have the best experience, there's nothing stopping me from pushing updates down. It's just you as a user have to take some action, which can be an automated action, right? Like you can have a little thing that pops up and says, hey, a new update is available. Do you want to download it? You click on yes. It goes out to the site, downloads the new app image, deletes the old app image, replaces the new one. You've seen this actually work in practice.
Yeah, so CurseForge, for people that don't know, is a mod manager for World of Warcraft and Minecraft and a whole bunch of other places. And they release their Linux binary as an app image, and it does exactly this. When you run it and you open it up, you get a pop-up dialog asking you if you want to update. And in the background, all that you see is the window disappears and then it reappears a couple seconds later. But if you're actually watching the directory wherever you had the app image, you'll see a new app image be downloaded, and then it renames the files around and then deletes the old one.
1-855-450-NOAH, 855-450-6624. The email live@asknoahshow.com. We want to hear from you, your questions, your thoughts, what works well for you. What do you have questions on? Write in. Allow Steve and I the opportunity to sound off on your question. The Linux challenge coin. Okay, so here's my problem with the Linux challenge coin. I get asked from time to time, people go, I thought you were talking about a Linux challenge coin. Did it ever get launched? Here's the problem, Steve. The problem is I don't know how to sell this. On paper, this is a really terrible idea. Like, nobody would want to do this. In fact, I got done sketching this out, and I read it over, and I stepped back, and I'm like, so you'd have to be a masochist to want to do this. Like, this is a terrible idea. This is not marketable at all. The board members are nervous. Everybody's nervous. This is going to be bad. And yet we're going to try to do this. So the goal here is to try to empower people with technology. Okay. And so to that end, we've created 4 pillars of what that looks like, the kind of people that we're looking for. So if you haven't heard past coverage on this, we're going to launch a challenge coin, but as opposed to just being a marketing thing or just a swag thing that you pick up at a conference, we want there to be meaning behind the coins. We're not just giving them out. You've got to earn them. And the way that you earn them is by demonstrating that you are a steward of technology and want to be that steward for other people in your life. So we've set forth these kind of 4 pillars of the idea, what the ideal person who is interested in achieving something like this would be looking for. The first is understanding that people are behind the tech. There's no question about it. Technology is cool. But no matter how much time you invest into it, no matter how much you love it, no matter how much passion you have for your project, it is never going to love you back. In the end, it is just a tool in society. Now, that said, we don't dismiss the nature of the tool as just, well, that's just a tool or it's just a software license, because there are human beings at the other end of those tools and at the other end of those software licenses, and their best interests need to be considered. And so the foundation for all of this is people. If you have people's best interest in mind, we have a rock to build from. Once we get the basics down, that is to say, we're focused on the people behind the tech and not the tech itself. So we're not solving technical problems so much as it is we are solving people problems with technology. Then we get to technology is at its best when it's open source, our second pillar. So when you're looking at long-term technical investments, that is to say something that a company or a person or a family or an organization can say, I want to hitch my star to this thing and I want to ride it to the moon and back. If that technology isn't open source, it's disposable. because you have no ability to maintain it for them long term. They will only be able to use that tool, that thing, as long as the software manufacturer licenses them to do so. The moment that company goes out of business, changes the model, upgrades the thing, changes the license, whatever it is, that technology must be disposed of and is no longer valuable to the user. So if you take it back to, we've got the user's best interest in mind, we don't sell them on disposable technology. We don't introduce disposable technology into their life. We try to make things as static and as stable and as approachable as possible. And that means that we're looking to open source, because when technology is at its best, it's open source. And as I was thinking about this, I was thinking, can you imagine if we went back to the world that we lived in today, if we didn't have open web standards? Can you imagine if it was, well, you sign up for AOL and you get this set of context, and you sign up for NetSuite and you get these set of content, and you sign up at Comcast and they have a set of content, and every web internet provider provides its own set of content. And just like social media is today, users would be expected to try to be on all of the places if they want to reach all the... What a disaster that would be. So as technology matures, as it becomes its best self, it's open by nature. It must be, because it needs to be able to interoperate, and it has to be able to mesh and meld with other things. And so when we have the best of something, it's open source. Now, that got me thinking, well, is the opposite true? Does that mean that proprietary is always bad, or that any of the companies that make proprietary software are always bad, and do they have bad motives? And as I thought about it, I don't think so, right? I think there are absolutely some, albeit limited times, but there are times when proprietary software is appropriate. Sometimes you have a very esoteric problem that not many people are interested in solving, and some company comes along and says, we will invest our own time and our own resources and our own people and our own support infrastructure to solve this problem. When you come across that thing, every once in a great while, I can understand why you would use a proprietary solution. However, it's a placeholder. It's a temporary thing. It's a disposable thing until the technology matures and grows. And once it becomes mature and it's ready for the long-term investment, we're looking for open source. The second thing there is proprietary technology, by its nature, is only willing to serve a group of people. So the company, be it their license terms or their cost or whatever it is, says, I will work with these people. I will not work with those people. And so if you have people's best interest in mind, you're looking for a solution that solves the problem for all people, not just a select group of people. And so that it doesn't matter if it's a business thing, it doesn't matter if it's your life thing, if your memories or your data, if it's tied to a proprietary solution, then you don't own that. Or the people behind the tech, the people that we're concentrating on, our rock here, those people don't really own that. The company, the proprietary company or the license agreement owns it. So to that end, we're looking for people that prioritize Linux, prioritize open source, and do those things to provide what I would call maximum technical liberty. That is to say, nobody gets to tell you what to do with your technology. You get to choose. And my personal example here is it is somewhat frustrating to me that my kids live in a world where they are encouraged and allowed to leverage technology to its full potential all the time, right? They want to bring a video into their computer, they can do that. They want to edit audio, they can do that. They want to do photo, or my daughters are very into art, they can do that. My son wants to do game development, he can do that. All of those tools are right there for the picking. It's right there at their disposal. I didn't grow up that way. I grew up where I was taught that there were these very cool things that you could do with computers, but I didn't have the $1,000 or $2,000 to go spend on the software necessary for me to be able to leverage my computer to do that. So it was an exclusive club that I was let into by way of the school, by way of the university, and they had some program access that you could get some of those things. But largely, it was a mother may I system, right? And the reality is that is not the way the world functions today. Today, it might start there, but again, eventually it matures into an open source product. And at that point, it adapts faster. It responds to community requests faster. The development cycle is faster. And so if you look at products that have done this, OpenOffice versus LibreOffice, who's using OpenOffice anymore? Nobody. If you look at OwnCloud versus Nextcloud, who's using OwnCloud? There's nobody using OwnCloud. They've all switched over to Nextcloud. The community has given this incredible drive and this incredible power and this incredible momentum to the more liberty-minded systems or the more free systems, and it becomes almost impossible to be overtaken. I don't think there's anybody that's going to compete with Nextcloud at this point, right? You look at, is the opposite true? When companies start with open source and they go closed source, do they bleed users? And I think if Redis is to be believed, the answer to that question is absolutely. Amazon, Oracle, they're all jumping ship. So they looked at it and they said, this is no longer has the user's best interest at heart, or us, the end user, so we're jumping ship, right? That tells me that in the end, people don't really want to surrender their tech. They don't really want to surrender their privacy to large corporations, but they're afraid of being responsible for stubbing their own toe. They know they're not nerds. They know they're not geeks, and they don't understand this stuff to the level that you do. And so by signing up with big company X, Y, or Z and having them back up my stuff, I don't stub my toe. And I just sign into my new device thingy, and all of my stuff syncs down to my device thingy, and that's great. Okay? So walk that path with those people. I 100% admit that not everybody is going to be served well by putting a server in their basement and saying, hey, look, there's a self-hosted server. Yeah, that's great. And you do that and you put it in and it works great for a few months or years or whatever it is. And then all of a sudden one day, because the person that you put it in has no interest in updating it, has no interest in managing it, doesn't really know what it does. It's just the scary white box that's downstairs that supposedly does something that they think is important. And sometimes it makes some noise. And so they have to restart it and then the thing comes back. But that's really to the extent that they understand it. Those people are not served well by shoving technology and going, look, here's some technology liberty for you, right? That's a terrible approach. Don't do that. So there are absolutely some people that, just like proprietary solutions, that it is appropriate to say, well, maybe this is appropriate for you to look at this cloud relationship or this cloud provider. In that vein, though, if you go that route, I want you to be intellectually honest with yourself, and I want you to be intellectually honest with the people that you're trying to help. At that point, you're no longer trying to manage the technology or teach them about it. You've given up, they've given up, and now both of you are looking to outsource that problem to another company. So in that regard, you become the person that helps them get help from their cloud provider. Because in the end, you're just as powerless to fix their problems as they are. If cloud provider XYZ makes a change, updates a feature, removes a feature, raises the prices, they're going to say, but I don't like this. And you're going to say, but I can't do anything about it. And you can't do anything about it. So your best option at that point is to help them build a good relationship with their cloud provider. You being in the middle of it, all that is the technological equivalent of you feeding the wild animals, right? Then they come back to you and say, well, sign me into this account. Well, sign me into that account. We don't want to create learned helplessness. We want to empower people. So if you decide to go the route of, well, I'm going to hand them off to a cloud provider, fine. But then facilitate their relationship with the cloud provider and you extricate yourself out of their situation. If you're willing to take the path less traveled, the people that need the cloud service thing, they don't need your help because the big names will take care of them, or they won't, and then they'll come to you. Help the people that want your help and want you to take care of them and want you to implement solutions for them. Do that. And then knowledge should be shared with other people. So the idea here is to empower the users that you're helping. So I'll just say this outright. If you're the guy that, well, I don't need to document the code because it's all in my head, just ask me. I promise you that everybody you work with hates working with you. And either from a technical standpoint, and they're working on your technical staff with you, or the people that are opening tickets, nobody wants to work with somebody like that. It's obnoxious. So if that's you, consider a different approach. The other thing, you're lying to yourself if you think that that's an effective strategy, right? That attitude and that way of technological management absolutely has a shelf life. It has a shelf life by way of you forget something that you thought was in your rock-tight, solid trap of a mind. It comes by way of you didn't have a password or somebody else was blocked by a password because the information wasn't in a mutually secured place that other people that you relied on can do. It shows a lack of trust in your end users. It shows a lack of trust in your team members. So all of those things are true. So don't put yourself in that situation. You're not helping anybody. You're taking away. You become part of the problem, not part of the solution. Knowledge is one of the few things in life that nobody can take away from you. If I teach you how to do something, even if you're locked in a jail cell and you're alone and away from everybody else and inside of your mind, you still have the things that you've learned, the knowledge that you've acquired. And Steve, I'd kind of be interested on your thoughts on this because you have entire presentations on knowledge for knowledge's sake.
I mean, that's kind of what drives me personally. And that's all of this is kind of personally driven in terms of how are you going to interact with other people and or share knowledge. There's a difference between. So I was having a conversation today, just a little tangent, with someone about the definition of a presentation. And I was saying, well, I think a presentation, people need to get what they learn out of, like they need to get something out of it. So the question was, do you let people interrupt you when you're presenting? And the answer is yes, because I want them to walk away with the maximum value from the thing. It's not about what I want to tell you. It's about what you want to learn from me, right? And that's directly applicable here is you can monologue, but that level of knowledge transfer is not probably going to be useful to the other person unless they think and communicate like you do. And so it's the knowledge should be shared to empower other users, as long as it is in a way that will be well received. Because as nerds, and I see it over and over again, we love to go down this like the nitty gritty of the thing that we're talking about because
Steve,
we're really excited about it.
Oh, it's so exciting.
Exactly. And we're excited about it, right? And we want to tell you. But honestly, that just goes over the head of the people that like, I just want to do a thing, man. I just needed to know, like, how do I install this browser extension? Don't switch my browser. Just tell me how to do this thing.
Exactly. And I think that ability to acquire a new skill is just an essential thing to learn in life. If you have the ability to teach yourself a new skill and you have the willingness to teach somebody else a new skill, I think that's a foregone conclusion that should be something you're open to. So, and the other thing is having a willingness to work downstream with people. So people that are not using the bleeding edge, people that are not using the exciting new thing that just came out. You're working there, your hands are busy there, but you're watching what's coming from upstream and you're trying to bridge the gap from what's coming down the road to what people are doing with you. And then the fourth pillar, be willing to do the work that your users don't want to do when you've reached the end of their desire to learn. So when you're sitting down with somebody and you're showing them how to do something, exactly what Steve was just talking about, where sometimes people want the information, right? So when they ask you, well, how does that work? That's the time to engage. And yeah, absolutely. Let me geek out with you and show you how this works and show you how to do this. No. I'm not going to drive. You drive. I'll just sit over here and I'll narrate to you and you take the controls and you drive the bus. Oh, that's really good. Okay. We start there. But at some point, you are watching them and you're watching for their wins as their face is lighting up and they're learning and the light bulbs are coming on and things are clicking and things are going really well. That's where you've got momentum and you keep going. The second their wins stop, when they get bored, you step up and you finish the project and you take it so that they have a good experience. And the go-to example I have of this is I was watching a friend of mine help his girlfriend rename MP3s. And they got to the point where she had like 1,200 MP3s and he had showed her how to modify the ID3 tags and explained what they were and how to, and so we got in fairly deep and she had the process down and he's like, okay, well, there you go. Now you got all the tools, go for it. And she's like, well, I have one done. I have 1,199 to go. And he's like, well, maybe you can, get a bash script. And I'm thinking in my head, no, you go write the bash script, right? Get her to ground zero. Get her to a point to where when she wakes up the next day, she knows what she's doing and she can kind of take it from there. But right now, you've given just enough information to whet her appetite to the point that she knows there is a solution out there, but she doesn't yet have it in her hand. And therefore, it isn't really all that valuable to her because she doesn't have the win. You've stopped short of sending the ball home. So be on the lookout to find those wins with other people. Like, here's what they asked me to do. Let's make sure we hit that. Once we hit that, then the project is done. And if their interest or the desire to learn peters out before you get there, then that's the opportunity to be like, you know what, you go have a Coke and a Snickers and hang out and I'm going to finish this up here and then we'll get to the other end of it and life will be better. But don't hang them short. So if that sounds like you, as I'm describing this, and this sounds like you, we want you to participate. Go to linuxchallengecoin.com. There you'll find all of these qualifications laid out. We want to hear a story from you or somebody that you'd like to nominate, people that exemplify these 4 pillars, people that are good stewards in the open source world. We want to hear from them. We want to hear their stories. We want to tell their stories. And then we want to reward you with a coin to show the appreciation and recognition we think you deserve for doing that kind of work. Vincent Danen. He is the Vice President of Product Security at Red Hat and the guest this hour on the Ask Noah Show. Vincent, welcome into the program.
Thank you for having me, Noah.
Thanks for making the time to be here. So I want to start here. Obviously, there was some concept of SBOM being kind of meaningless or fluff, and after the XZ incident, I think we've all kind of moved past that. Can you take me back to how Red Hat handled that situation? What were some of the lessons learned?
Yeah, I think when it comes to the SBOM part, I do still think a lot of people think it's a little bit of fluff and maybe not so useful. I do agree with you. The XZ part maybe highlighted the fact that that is important, but I'd probably add to that, it's the actual use and production of those SBOMs in the first place. So if we look at the XZ incident itself, it happened in the last 2 versions of software that XZ released. So when it comes to the SBOMs, those versions wouldn't necessarily show up in an SBOM. But what it would do is for those customers who had an SBOM provided by their vendor, they'd actually be able to find and know for a fact that they didn't have those vulnerable versions, which is kind of handy, right? When it comes to XZ itself and kind of how Red Hat responded there, we were fortunate. It only affected a pre-release version of Fedora 40 and kind of the in-testing Rawhide rapid development version. So none of our actual customers were impacted in any meaningful way. Some of our users who use the Fedora project, if they were running the more bleeding edge ones, that might have been impacted, but in a probably not overly significant way, because you really needed to have your server accessible to the internet in order for that to be compromised. So if most of our users, I'd say, are kind of using it for their laptops, bleeding edge development versions, they wouldn't necessarily have their laptop sitting without a firewall directly to the internet, whereby the malicious actor would be able to compromise them. So in a lot of ways, it actually turned out relatively good.
Do you see open source as being kind of an advantage in that realm from the standpoint that everything is so open that, you know, if you take a traditional supply chain, right? We don't talk and open the code up. Are you kidding? That's behind a closed wall while we're developing and pushing it. And so the first time anybody sees it is once it's out in the wild. In Red Hat's case, it's the exact opposite. The code from its very inception starts in the open, develops through the open, and eventually makes it into the paying customer's place. But it was caught way back here over at stage 1. Is that an advantage? Do you see it for open source?
Huge advantage. And there's been a lot of criticism around the XZ issue in the first place, where people were basically saying like, oh my goodness, we didn't catch it for 2 months, but we caught it, right? And so I kind of look at that as open source as designed, right? Somebody caught it because something was a little bit slower and they were curious and they could actually go and look. If that were, say, some proprietary software and it was a little bit slower, maybe they file a bug, maybe they don't. Maybe they just assume, it got worse or something else is interfering with it. I have no option to go look, and at least with open source, you can. So I kind of look at that as one of those primary benefits of open source. And again, this one, it worked by design. It actually reminds me of, this is quite a few years ago now, Borland released their Interbase product to the open source community as the Firebird project. And it was found that there was a hard-coded username and password in the proprietary software that was found after it was open sourced. And that username and password that were hard-coded in there were there for 7 years prior to being at open source. And once it was open source, it was found relatively quickly, right? So I look at that again, huge benefits of open source.
So by comparison, proprietary software sits for years at a time. We're lucky if you make it 2 months. And really, the only reason they made it a few months is because they didn't do a very good job of covering their tracks and establishing an identity ahead of time. And so a lot of that then opened itself up to scrutiny, and people were able to look and go, something doesn't smell right here.
Yeah, there was a lot of opportunity to be able to look at, particularly for the XZ backdoor, the situation around it. And that was actually a really rather clever attack, just because of the amount of time and investment to set the stage for it in the first place. And so even there, I mean, as we reflect back and we kind of look at these things, we're always thinking like, how can we make this stuff better? How can we change things a little bit? And this one's really tough because even their open source work is designed. You want contributors. You want people to grow into maybe a maintainership role so you can ease the burden of existing maintainers. Sometimes projects change hands. And so these are the sorts of things we don't want to say like, no more contributors get maintainer access, because then we've kind of cut ourselves off at the knees almost, right? So when we're looking at that, I think it's really important to, particularly for people who don't understand open source, to sit there and go, that's a terrible model and we shouldn't do that, because that's precisely what got us here so quickly and reduces that burden on open source maintainers. They need people to help them. And when people are offering help, I mean, guardrails aside, we should be looking for people to kind of carry the torch moving forward.
What are you hearing from your partners? What are some of their concerns? What were their expectations of you and of Red Hat to address this?
I think a lot of people got understandably upset and understandably worried, and then wondering, what else is out there? What else can we find? But I think on the bigger picture, again, open source working as designed, the way that Red Hat has its curation process also working as designed, like going from upstream into Fedora, right, which is the only place where it was kind of found. It's intentionally, Fedoras are baking ground for things that are going to make it up into RHEL, right? And so for it to be kind of there, it's a known risk, it's acceptable risk, but the curation process from Fedora to RHEL is a lot longer. So even something that if it hadn't been found for 6 months, it still wouldn't show up in RHEL, right? And if there was, I actually thought about this, a different perspective. And maybe this, if Gia, if you're out there listening, here's an idea for next time. Kidding. One of those things that would actually make people adopt that software faster is if you fixed a security vulnerability, right? Because everybody wants to fix all these vulnerabilities. So if we say the new version of XC fixes this vulnerability, you really need to go grab the latest version of it and stuff. And some people would do that. When it comes to like an enterprise Linux distribution that Red Hat provides, we wouldn't take that new version anyways. Like even if there was a security fix there, we pull out the part that actually fixes a security vulnerability and backport it to the older version that we have. So even if they had pulled off an attack like that, we still have that level of insulation there because we're just going to fix the security vulnerability. We vet it, test it, make sure that the fix is valid, and we've just isolated that small piece of code. So if there were malware introduced at the same time, it still wouldn't have made it into our products.
What impact, if any, do you see this having on people supporting the upstream project?
That's a tough question. And I think there's a number of different angles there. I think it makes people nervous now in terms of like looking for who might be trying to contribute, what might be their motive behind it. In this particular instance, like there was the one person, or the one entity, I guess, that was being super helpful over those 2 years, but then there was another account, real or the same person, we don't know, that basically was suggesting, hey, you need to get this person involved and trying to like putting undue pressure on the maintainer. And I think that's wrong even when open source is working good. Like you shouldn't be pressuring those maintainers. And I suspect a lot of maintainers now are going to be very hesitant to accept help, even when it's offered in altruistic and legitimate ways. So I think there's that perspective. I think when it comes to like a vendor like open source or any other kind of enterprise open source provider, we're going to have to start looking a little harder at, say, community health metrics. And there are a number of different projects out there that purport to do things like that. And I think we're just going to have to make it a consistent process for everything. But then even going further than just that one piece of code that we want to pull in, what are the other dependencies that it pulls in as well? And can we do that same level of due diligence with all of these dependencies, whereas we might just be tempted to be not doing that for those. So I think there's going to be a little bit of there's a lot of dust around this right now. It's going to take a little bit of time for it to settle. And then I think we're going to have to figure out a path that works forward for both the vendors and those open source producers, those developers, that kind of makes sense moving forward.
Talking about paths and tactics a little bit, we saw with Heartbleed, there was no malice there. It was just they were overwhelmed. There was more work than any in a small group of people could do, and in the light of it, what ended up happening was corporations and companies did step up to start funding them. In this case, it was very much malicious. What kind of tactics can be used to effectively combat these sorts of attacks?
That one's challenging as well. Like with Heartbleed, the OpenSSL group was fairly small. I don't necessarily know that they were overwhelmed. I think the thing that made it unique was Heartbleed was the first named vulnerability, first one with the logo, first one with a name. I started off that whole annoying trend, right? Being in my position, I find it very obnoxious, but it is what it is. But it was also a core piece of technology that everybody used. I mean, OpenSSL is used everywhere, right? And I think that once people realized how critical it was to a lot of different projects and infrastructure, and it didn't have the investment probably required to maybe take that extra step, that's where some of the investment showed up. I know that there are outfits like the OpenSSF and others, they have their Alpha Omega program, and those do contribute to those projects that are deemed more critical. And so they'll go in there and try to perform auditing on their behalf or try to enhance some of the security features and capabilities in a product. And I think those things are really good, and funding that kind of work is really important. I'd like to think that we're going to see more of that. I also think that there are a lot of vendors who consume a lot of open source and don't necessarily give anything back, right? There are a lot of companies that do give a lot back, maybe in terms of money, maybe in terms of development resources. And these ones I think are a little bit more legit than some random person on the internet, right? Because, whether it's from Red Hat or Google or somebody else, like there's a company behind it. And I think that some of those other companies that maybe aren't as invested in open source actually have to start investing. Whether it's dollars, whether it's developers, whether it's even hosting resources. I think we're going to have to see a lot more of that because we all benefit from it, and they certainly benefit from it financially. And so I think it's almost a responsibility to give a little something back.
How does Red Hat draw the line when you're talking about the scope of upstream projects? Things that Red Hat doesn't necessarily have control over and doesn't necessarily support, but a product maybe depends on it or a product maybe relies on it. How do you draw those lines?
That one's really challenging as well, but for the most part, we're kind of looking at those primary upstream projects and components that are very material to our offerings, right? So think about things like the Linux kernel or Kubernetes or even glibc. Like we're very invested in a lot of those projects, but we ship thousands of different components and we can't be involved in all of them. We do try, like even on the product security side, to be involved in either assisting security teams or being a part of security teams for some of those projects that are a little bit more meaningful for us. And so we do try to be a little bit more hands-on in that work. But we do recognize that we can't do that for every single project. A lot of these are, Python modules or NPM projects that it's a single maintainer that's pulled in by a dependency of a dependency. And so it's hard to invest the same amount of resource and effort into all of them. And I think it's, again, going back earlier, that kind of that community health metric, whatever that looks like. I don't know what that looks like right now. Kind of applying that consistently across everything, and then seeing, what are some of the levers we can pull? Is there a way that we can help? Is there a way that we can maybe invest for something that is core to what we deliver to our customers? It's a bit of an open question. I think everyone is trying to figure that out, and we have a long history of doing this, and I think we do pretty good, but there are still avenues to do better.
Vincent Danen, he is the VP of Product Security at Red Hat and a guest this hour on the Ask Noah Show. Vincent, I really appreciate the time. It's been an absolute pleasure. We'll get you back on the program soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Alma Linux this week, introducing the Engineering Steering Committee, also known as ALESCO. Quote, "When we were surprised by Red Hat's change last year, we were given a new freedom that we have been very happy to take advantage of. Due to the sudden nature of the choice, though, the discussion around where to deviate from RHEL and what changes we might want to make have had a relatively closed way. ALESCO allows us to correct that. ALESCO is responsible for reviewing the suggestions from the community and then inviting feedback from everyone. Finally, formalizing and publicizing those engineering decisions. This group will guide the operating system in a very public way, furthering our goal of providing full transparency regarding the technical decisions surrounding Alma Linux. On the surface, I think this is absolutely fantastic. Every time a company wants to do something more out in the open and be more responsive to their users' feedback and their user base, I think that's absolutely wonderful. It's absolutely great. Here would be my questions. Without Red Hat, when you were dealing with Red Hat and Red Hat released a code base and then others duplicated the open source code base and then released their own, effectively you're cloning it. We all understand what's happening there, right? Big company spends a bunch of money, develops a very reliable, robust product that millions of places and businesses rely upon all around the world, to include some of the world's biggest companies. People want to share in that success, but we either don't want to pay that company for it, or we don't like the fact that it's behind a paywall or behind a thing. And so we're more comfortable with this thing hanging out here in the open. And so we use it. That makes sense to me, because if it works in the open thing hanging out here in the community, then it's going to work on this very proprietary, very dialed in thing over there. I shouldn't say proprietary because it's still open source, but this thing tied to this company. The other thing that I've seen to some great extent, to work to some great extent, is organizations, universities, other places that have one place where they spin things up in the free or impact-free version, and then they go and buy a license when they actually need to go deploy something. So I've seen that model work for places. I'm confused at what model works well to where you don't have Red Hats, so you're not centering it around their standards, but you are centering around standards. I'm also curious as to how this differs from the OpenELA. The OpenELA, you might recall, is an agreement among the other players like Rocky and Oracle and such, SUSE, to make sure that they're conforming to one central standard, because it was acknowledged by basically all of the Red Hat clones. If Red Hat's moving in a different direction, we need to have something to standardize around, and we want to give the community an enterprise operating system. So how best to do that? So I wish Alma Linux all the success in the world. I think it's really great. Again, especially with their history and track record of having things like office hours and answering questions and directing criticism or addressing criticism right away. I think having things like a technical engineering steering committee, I think is an absolutely fantastic win. But I'm curious as to who the target audience of this is and how this helps them. Be interested to answers to those questions. Hey, Southeast Linux Fest is upon us. It's just a couple of weeks away. Now, one of the things that you can do is you can join us remotely, or you can join us in person. If you're coming in person, it's June 7th, 8th, and 9th. Well, actually, what am I talking about? If it's remote, it's still 7th, 8th, and 9th. But you need to book your rooms now if you haven't already. 2024 registration and schedule is available, and registration is now open, so I invite you to do that. We're going to be having a meetup. If you're interested in hanging out, come grab dinner with us. We're going to be eating at a place called Pinky's Friday night at 6 p.m. We'll have all of the details in the show notes. You can find those at podcast.asknoahshow.com. Again, Southeast Linux Fest in Charlotte, North Carolina, June 7th, 8th, and 9th at the Sheraton Charlotte Airport in Charlotte, North Carolina. Hope to see you there. The music in our ears means we're out of time. I thank you for joining us. The show airs every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central. You can learn more at asknoahshow.com. Head over to podcast.asknoahshow.com. There you'll find the show notes, the articles and references we used to create the show, as well as the entire back catalog. Catch up. We started back in 2017. You got a ways to go. If you want to follow us in real time, I'm on X at Colonel Linux. He's at Linux Ovens. The show is at Ask Noah Show. We're back next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central. AskNoahShow.com. Have a good week.